7 waiver wire. Now, Rob can't make it to this video, so I'm going to try something a little new. I want things to go by a little bit quicker. I'm going to try to talk about the same amount of players, maybe a few less, but I'm not going to go super in-depth on any of them. One, to save your guys' time, but two, since Rob's not here, I want to take this as an opportunity to just kind of try things out. And if you're not satisfied with the information I'm giving, you know what? That's not a big deal. I've got the research. I'm just not going to talk about it all. And you can leave a comment down below. I know I missed some on the last video. It's been crazy. Things been going on. But anyways, we got to just get right into it because this has been a crazy week from that awesome overtime touchdown by KJ Osborn for the Vikings. That was such a fun game to watch. And, to think 2 of their 3 losses were by, just like late field goals in close games to good teams like the Cardinals. Man, the Vikings could really be like 5-1 right now when you think about how those games could have gone. So it's been fun to be a Vikings fan, but that's not only the big thing. What about Tua? He had a big game in his first game back, or Khalil, Herbert, their running back for the Bears, had a big week, and we even see the fallout from the Tua thing where, Jaylen Waddle, he had a monster performance once again. So there's really a lot to talk about. But before we get into anything, I want to remind you guys that if you are in a league where you just don't look like it's going to happen, especially in a dynasty league where it's just not looking like the year for you, remember to pick up these guys like Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, and Cam Akers, and the list goes on and on. If you have an IR spot, make sure to use it. And if you don't have an IR spot, but your team is currently sitting at 1-5 in your fantasy league, it's time to make trades and prep for the next season in Dynasty. Please don't forget to do that. But anyways, let's just get right into it. Start talking off with a couple of quarterbacks. All right, so I'm only going to talk about a few quarterbacks because, well, like we've said every single week, there's a ton of good options. So I just want to consider a few guys to mention here. One of them is Carson Wentz. He is 65% available, and people are really shying away from him because the season started so ugly for the Colts. It really did, and, it hasn't been a great year for them as a whole. But it started really slow for that offense. Jonathan Taylor in that backfield, they were good in the passing game, but they were just not getting it done on the ground. They had injuries to Carson Wentz's ankle, which really hurt his production, as well as T.Y. Hilton was out, and their wide receivers had some chemistry issues. In fact, Wentz missed basically the entire offseason with injuries. And then their best offensive lineman, their interior guy, the anchor of their O-line, Quentin Nelson, was hurt as well. They were really banged up all around, and so they struggled, but they have really found their stride. They've gotten a little bit healthier. They've figured out their running game. Their quarterback, Wentz, he has played so much better. And that's not my opinion. The stats say that. Look at his quarterback rating the last 3 games. 115, 127, and 128. He has been lights out the last couple of games. In fact, and I put this out there, I said before the season that I was a big fan of Wentz and I thought this was going to be a good year for him. This is more what I was expecting. Not the most phenomenal fantasy numbers. They don't need him to be Pat Mahomes. They're not trying to get him to throw 4 touchdowns a game, and they don't have the wide receivers to do that. But he's played really well. And speaking of the receivers, T.Y. Hilton comes back, has 80 yards in his first game. Michael Pittman, after week 1, he has certainly looked better. He had, 8 catches week 2, and then 3 weeks in a row of 6. He has looked better, and so even guys like Moali Cox, I think, has had 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games, if I am not mistaken. So all around, Carson Wentz is a guy to look at. Most importantly, I love the matchups coming out. The 49ers, the Titans, the Jets, and the Jaguars, those are great games. Absolutely consider Carson Wentz as a quarterback for you to pick up. Again, not been the most exciting guy, but you need to project forward. You can't look at the past and you can't look at your nerves. We always say check your emotions at the door, and I think Wentz is one of those players to remind us of that. Another guy to talk about really briefly is Tua. How do we not talk about this guy who comes back this week from that rib injury? First game back, 330 yards passing and 2 TDs. He looked great. And more than him looking great, you know what he did? He helped Jaylen Waddle look great. Now, we're going to talk about Jaylen Waddle later on in the wide receiver, so I'm not going to talk about him too much, but Tua is miles better than Jacoby Brissett. And although the Dolphins certainly have their issues this year, they do not look like the team that many people expected them to be. Tua's been good. He has stepped up and he has played better. Guys, he's got some weapons. Now, of course, there have been injuries to their wide receivers, but he's a guy to consider. I don't absolutely love him, but I would say watch him. If he has another good week, then he's a guy you need to pick up. Because really, he had that game one versus the Patriots, who are one of the best defenses in the league. They are, it's a divisional matchup, so they see each other every year. He got really limited in that game, but he was playing, with his best receiver being in his NFL debut. So wasn't too surprised there. I want to see these next few games. Now, we've really basically only seen 2 games from him, and he was still a little bit banged up in this matchup. So keep your eyes peeled. Is this one of the years that he is taking strides forward? Will he continue to be the quarterback the Dolphins drafted him to be? If today was any sign, the answer is yes. Finally, Derek Carr. He is still 48% available. That means he is an option for 50% of you. And I get it. Go back to not this week, but last week. He had a bad game. He just wasn't good. I think he had 0 touchdowns all around. The production wasn't there. So I think some people dropped him, and that boosted his availability. But you know what? He was just fine. Despite all the drama with everything going on there with John Gruden, we're not going to get into it, but you lose your head coach and your special teams coordinator moves up into that role. And what happens? Oh, well, apparently the Raiders are perfectly fine. They start using Kenyan Drake properly, and he becomes this awesome weapon. Heck, even Josh Jacobs had a nice play. He had that nice catch on the screen pass. He took that for quite a few yards. In fact, that offense as a whole was fine. Carr had 340 yards and 2 touchdowns, and most importantly, he had that against a Broncos defense that going into the game allowed the second fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So that was a really shockingly impressive game from the Raiders. I'm excited to see what they can do moving forward. With this coaching situation and everything going on, it's hard for me to sit here and say that I trust them to be this, juggernaut that's going to go out and win the Super Bowl. Probably not going to happen, but things are looking a lot brighter than they did just a couple of days ago. So Raiders fans, keep your head up. I mean, after all, they went out guns a-blazing on the first drive and hit Ruggs for that long touchdown. It was fun to watch. It was really exciting. We're going to see how things develop. But those are the 3 quarterbacks you need to consider. We could break down more. We could spend more time on it. But ultimately, those are just some options. You might have more. Keep your eye out and leave a comment down below if there's someone you're considering that I didn't talk about at this position. All right, so let's get into the running backs now. There's a lot of names to consider. Of course, it's going to depend on your league scoring, PPR, standard, dynasty, whatever you're looking for. So let's just get into these guys. Not going to dig too deep, just going to give you the information you need. And the first guy we have to talk about is Khalil Herbert, running back for the Bears. At 35% available, he is a must-own running back. You need to pick him up in your leagues while David Montgomery is out. In fact, there's a few things going on there. One, Dave Montgomery will guaranteed be out another week because of the IR rules. He has to be out at least 3 weeks. 2, based on that injury, it does not seem like he's going to be back. I think it's going to be more than that 1 week, that necessary 3rd week. So he could be a much more, viable solution to your running back position, especially those replacing Montgomery for the next possibly 2 or even 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how that goes. Not going to dig into the injury right now because we don't know a ton about it. And, it's just boring. It's not fun to talk about. We got a lot to cover. He has been nothing but productive filling in for Montgomery. Not last game, but the game before, he had 18 carries for 75 yards and really stepped it up this last game. 19 carries, 97 yards, a touchdown, and even 15 receiving yards. That was, 5.1 yards per carry. He looked good. He's been a very effective running back. He's young. He's got a good size to him, not super small or anything like that. No worries there. Definitely pick him up. He is going to be a huge help to you. Again, see a big dynasty pickup? No, probably not. Montgomery will come back, and a healthy David Montgomery will be the starter in that offense. But as we've said, stop looking at the championship. Stop looking to next year. You need to look at this week. And amongst the running backs, he is hands down the best short-term running back option. Of course, you also need to look at Eli Mitchel. He is 36% available. And in smaller leagues, I'm not huge on this guy, because you're not going to start him compared to a ton of other elite stud running backs, but you do at least need to own him. He is a rookie running back who has looked great, has a solid yards per carry. He's been nothing but effective. In fact, when you look at it, last game he saw just 9 carries, but the next running back in that offense got just 1 carry. Really, the only big concern there is Trey Lance. Trey Lance had 16 carries for 89 yards last game. So that is the biggest ball hog you have to worry about is the quarterback. If Jimmy Garoppolo were under center, there would be even more value for a guy like Eli Mitchell. But as of right now, with the running backs they have healthy and available to them, Mitchell is hands down their most talented running back. And really, that's all that matters. So make sure to consider picking him up. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to start him. In a large leagues, you definitely can. Small leagues, probably not. But this isn't a start-sit video. This is a waiver wire video, and you'd be dumb to let him sit out on your waiver claims unless you're completely loaded at running back. You also got to consider Michael Carter. Now, this comes down to be a bit more of a dynasty pick here, but he is 48% available. He is a young rookie running back who, considering the offense that he's played for, looks pretty good this year. His yards per carry and his metrics aren't wonderful, but if you were the running back for the Jets, yours wouldn't be either, so don't overthink it. They were also on a bye week last week, but the 2 previous games, he had back-to-back touchdowns. And though he started the season in a running back by committee, he has clearly set himself the RB1 in that offense. And if Zach Wilson can continue to develop and that offense can improve, there might be some fantasy value there this year as well. Either way, I think you should own him, especially in deep leagues. Again, I get it if you're in an 8-team league and you are stacked and you aced your picks. Certainly you're not going to drop another stud for him, but there's definitely some value there. And he's a guy where if I'm in a dynasty league and, maybe I'm 1-5 or whatever, put him on your roster. He could have huge value next year depending on what happens. Say Deshaun Watson becomes the Jets quarterback, things like that. Of course, you got to look at a guy like Alex Collins. He has ran well, and he will be the running back in replacement while the starter is out there in Seattle. As long as Chris Carson is gone, it's Alex Collins' offense, so make sure you need to pick him up. Hopefully you've listened to us over the last couple of weeks and already rostered him, but did want to mention that one more time just in case anybody missed him. One guy that I would say is maybe a bit of a red herring is Mark Ingram. He's got 36 touches over just the last 2 games, and that is huge volume. But considering he is over the course of the whole season outside the top 50 in fantasy running back scoring, and in the last 2 weeks, even with all those touches, he hasn't been considered fantasy startable. In fact, one game he scored just 4 fantasy points, and the other he scored 10, and that's in PPR leagues. You just got to wonder what's up with Mark Ingram there. The volume's there, but the points are not. What happens when the volume goes away? He is highly available out there, and the volume is there, so he'll be tempting. But for me, there's not enough upside. I can't see myself doing it. There's one time I might do it, and that's if I were in a league that had like 14 or 16 teams, and I was really desperate for a running back. But to be quite honest with you, even then, if you were smart with the way you did things and you used your waivers properly, you probably could have gotten another guy a couple weeks ago. I think you still might have some better options. You also want to consider Marlon Mack. Now, he is 70% available, and you do not want to do this unless you are in a large league or a league that has a large bench. Here's the thing. He's a former running back who formerly had 1,000 rushing yards. He looked very effective. In fact, he looked primed to have a good career before getting hurt. And over the last 2 games, he had 11 touches for 66 yards. That's 6 yards per touch. He's looked fairly effective, and the rumors are that the Colts are trying to trade him. If he does end up in another offense that's good but needs a running back, he could very well be a fantasy stud. So he might be a guy to stash for now. If he does get traded, you're going to have to use a high waiver claim spot to get him. So maybe take a shot on that now if you're looking to get rid of some dead weight on your bench. Another guy that really excites me is Kenyan Drake. He had 4 carries for 34 yards. That's 8.5 yards per carry, as well as 2 catches for 39 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns last game. That's huge. Suddenly he gets a new coaching staff, and it's almost like he's gotten a new career, freshly revitalized. They used him in a really creative ways. I felt like they just used him better, and they also managed to use him while Josh Jacobs was in the game as well. So that is really big things. I think getting a new coach who wants to run a bit of a new offense, certainly it's not going to be 100% new, but if they change things, there might be more role there for Kenyan Drake, so I would at least keep an eye on him. Finally, there's one more running back you need to consider watching. Probably don't pick him up, but keep your eye on him, and that is Salvon Ahmed. He led the Dolphins' backfield for carries last game. Now, his yards per carry wasn't great. He had just 3.1 yards per carry, but he did have a 15-yard catch. And again, the efficiency certainly wasn't there, but neither of the other running backs in that offense have been terribly efficient. I also find it very notable that the game he steps up and gets the majority of the carries is also the game that Tua comes back. Maybe those two things are going to go hand in hand, as the Dolphins have shown themselves clearly this year. They need to change some things and they need to do some things better. I wouldn't pick him up yet as the production hasn't been there. But again, volume is everything in real estate. They say location, location, location. In fantasy football, no, that's volume, volume, volume. So when you see a guy get the most carries in a backfield, you need to be paying attention to that. If it happens back-to-back weeks, if next week he sees even a few more carries, there might be some fantasy value there. Again, I've said this like 3 times already. I wouldn't pick him up. I want to clarify that, but I do have to mention him in the video because he does have some value, and you need to be watching this dude, because if he continues to take over that role a little bit more over time, maybe he proves himself in the passing game, or he improves his yards per carry, something like that. There's going to be fantasy value there. So that was the running backs. Let's move on to the wide receivers now. But even though we're moving on from the running backs to the receivers, we're going to stick with the Dolphins. We have to talk about Jaylen Waddle. At 35% available, he is a must grab. This is an early first-round pick, rookie wide receiver who has looked nothing but dominant. And I mean that. When his quarterback, Tua, is out there, he has played great. In Tua's first game back, Waddle sees 13 targets, 10 catches, 70 yards, and 2 TDs. He is racking up catches, PPR stud, but oh yeah, he also had the 2 touchdowns, so you got that standard league thing there. The fact of the matter is, he is the wide receiver 1 in that offense, hands down. He should not be available in basically any leagues. Even if you're in a 10-team league or an 8-team league, you gotta own him, even if you have 3 elite, phenomenal stud wide receivers. Like somehow you managed to draft the number 1, 2, and 3 wide receivers this year, and those are your starters. He should at least be on your bench. He is way too good not to own. It's crazy to me that people aren't seeing that. Again, he is a top 10 first round pick. I don't understand it. Pick him up. Even when Brissett was the quarterback, I couldn't see why people didn't own him. But hey, that's just me. He has had multiple great games this year, and he has proven that he can be a stud at finding the end zone, and when needed, he's the dependable guy who can see a ton of volume. There's nothing more exciting than a receiver who can do both, and Waddle, as young as he is, has proven he can do both. Moving on to some other wide receivers. Again, tons of guys here to cover. What about Sterling Shepard? At 48% available, how do you ignore a wide receiver who is nothing but dominant? When he's healthy, he's productive. Look at last game. 14 targets, 10 catches, and 76 yards in his first game back. In fact, he's averaging just under 9 catches a game when he's healthy. I don't even know what to say about that. You include the fact that Slayton and Kenny Golladay are hurt, and then even Kadarius Toney is questionable, and they've got some tight ends there, but not really lived up to their potential, like Ingram, and then the backfield's been hurt because Barkley's out. How do you not see Shepard as a must-own guy? The volume is there. The talent is there. I even like his quarterback. Daniel Jones has played pretty good this year before getting hurt, but even if Jones is out, that backup will lean on Shepard. Again, you're not getting wide receiver 1 upside. He's not going to be Devontae Adams. Like with a Waddle, you might get that Devontae Adams upside. You're not going to see that with Shepard, but he is incredibly safe. The only thing there that might not be there, fantasy value-wise, is the touchdowns. But you are picking from the waiver wire here. It's not like you're taking him with your 2nd or 3rd round pick. So, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. I'm going to stick with the safe and secure volume. Got to pick that guy up. What about T.Y. Hilton? He's 61% available, and in his first game back, he led the Cardinals offense for targets, and he had 4 catches for 80 yards. If he continues to get that rust off, I am afraid to see what he can do. Are we going to see a vintage T.Y. Hilton? That might be a bit of a stretch, but he does have a new quarterback who can use his abilities well, hopefully buy some time, let him get down the field. You got to wonder, at the very least, this is a slight improvement for the Colts offense as a whole, and it will be a big help to Carson Wentz. Rashod Batemen, here is another rookie wide receiver who looks good. Now, we have seen just one game from Rashod Batemen, but here's what you need to know. At 72% available, he is a must-pick-up guy. Again, as a first-round rookie, why are you not paying attention to this guy? That alone, you need to be keen on him. But in his first game, he has 6 targets, 4 catches for 29 yards. In fact, he led that offense for targets across from Marquez Goodwin. There's going to be some hiccups. Not every game is phenomenal. I'm not saying he's going to start getting, 8 to 10 catches for 100-plus yards, but that's his first game back. He had the volume in targets in a 34-6 win. Now, he did have a terrible drop. It went off of his chest and actually turned into an interception. But you know what? I was really excited to see something the Ravens did that I really didn't expect them to do. They threw him into the deep end, kicked him into the fire, and said, good luck. And you know what? You hate that as a person. It makes you uncomfortable. You don't like when your boss just throws you into the deep end. But you know what it does? Makes you a better employee. And for Rashod Batemen, I think that's going to make him a better wide receiver. It's going to be a few weeks until he can get into the NFL and really take over that position. But I wouldn't be surprised if 4 or 5 weeks from now, he was challenging Marquez Goodwin as the wide receiver 1 in that offense. I do mean that. That's his upside. There's certainly a downside there that he may not live up to that. I'm not saying it's anything like a guarantee. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised. I would be very, likely that Marquez Goodwin will continue to be that wide receiver 1. But why not take a chance on him, You got to play for upside at this point, especially when you're scraping through the waiver wire for talent. Amon St. Brown, he has had 18 catches over 3 games, but he's not a big yardage guy. He doesn't have any touchdowns all year. Because of the catches, I did want to bring him up because of that offense and the way they've used him. I do want to mention him. Not as big on him as I have been about some of these other receivers. In fact, I've got 2 more receivers I want to talk about that I like more than him, but I did want to bring him up. What about KJ Osborn? At 92% available, he's had some big games. 6 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown, including an overtime game-winning catch. First things first, Minnesota, get another kicker or I'm going to lose my freaking mind. I can't handle it anymore. I'm so frustrated. I'm sick and tired of, should have beaten the Bengals, should have beaten the Cardinals. Hey, we had a close loss to the Browns. We could very well be 5-1 with a close loss to the Browns, looking like one of the best teams in the league. And because we don't have a good kicking situation and a few that dice rolls don't go our way, we're just 500. But man, the Vikings have surprised me this year, and one of them is Osborn. Now I'll say this: when Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are healthy, he doesn't have consistent enough volume to start him from week to week. But you do need to own him, and you really need to own him. If one of those guys goes down with an injury, he will see a huge bump in volume and be a must-start player. He's got the talent to shine. In fact, he looks like he could be our next Diggs, our next Thielen, our next Jefferson. In a Vikings just team as a whole that has produced so many talented receivers like Chris Carter and Randy Moss, Thielen, Diggs, all those other guys that I've named, he could be the next. I think you need to at least own him, stash him on your bench. The upside is way too high. In fact, other than Waddle, he's got the highest upside of anyone on this list. It's just a matter of volume and the wide receivers ahead of him. Finally, a receiver you got to mention is Donovan Peoples-Jones. Last game, or not this last game, but the game before that, he has 6 targets and 5 catches for 70 yards. This last game, he had 5 targets, 4 catches, 101 yards, and 2 TDs. With the struggling chemistry between Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham, Donovan Peoples-Jones has really worked himself into that wide receiver 1 role the last couple of weeks. If he can continue that, he will be a huge steal for you off of the waiver wire. He is a must-pick-up wide receiver. He does not have the upside like some of these other receivers do, but he's also a really safe pickup. He has a role in that offense. He's got a good offense. They're going to find the red zone. They're going to move the ball. I like him a lot, especially in standard leagues. He doesn't have enough volume of catches. I don't see him being a guy who can go out in any given week and have 10 catches for 100 plus yards. But in standard leagues, if you can play based on matchup, plug him in as your wide receiver 3 and gamble for a touchdown, I feel all right about that. I don't love it, but hey, you get into the fantasy season. We're going into week 7. It's the dog days of fantasy football. As I've said a few times now, beggars can't be choosers, and that's not so bad coming off the waiver wire. All right, so finally, let's get into the tight ends and the defenses. There are not a lot of tight ends to mention. I didn't feel like really digging into a ton of numbers. But here are 2 guys that kind of fill 2 different roles for you that you should consider. One is Zach Ertz at 40% available. The Cardinals just made a trade for him to replace Max Williams. Before Max Williams got hurt, he was actually getting pretty good volume and was arguably the number 2 target in that offense. Sure, Christian Kirk has had big games, and Green has had big games. Even Rondale Moore had a big game, but it was clear that their numbers really came as a result and a product purely of the talent of Kyler Murray. If Zach Ertz can play better, and I expect him to, than Max Williams did, there's no reason he can't see 6 to 8, maybe even 10 targets a game. And I don't know that necessarily he's going to have those 10 targets every game, but if he can get you in that 6 to 10 range, and most importantly, he can be the red zone guy who can help them finish off drives and score you touchdowns, he's worth a shot. So if you've got a roster spot available, you want to dump some dead weight, pick up Zach Ertz, especially for guys like me who have got tight ends like Gronk who are hurt, and we're kind of scrambling for players right now. In fact, I'm kicking myself. I'm in a dynasty league. I wanted to upgrade a position, and I had both Gronk and Mark Andrews. So I made a trade and I got rid of Mark Andrews. I thought, you know what? I'm going to keep the safe production. I'm going to keep the touchdowns with Gronk, and I'm going to get rid of Mark Andrews, who he seems too week to week. He seems too gambly and hard to predict what he's going to do. So I'm going to use him as leverage to upgrade another position and earn some draft picks for the future. I felt really great about that. Gronk's now hurt, and I'm feeling really stupid about that. So I guess let me know if you think that was dumb of me to make that move. But there were a lot of players involved in that trade. I think at the time I couldn't have known better. But if you're looking for an opposite guy, a guy who is much safer and a much short-term player, it's got to be Ricky Seals-Jones. Filling in there for their tight end Logan Thomas there on the Washington football offense. He's been pretty good. 71% available, and that does not sound like, or his stats don't sound like a guy who is that highly available. He had 9 targets, 5 catches, and 41 yards 2 games ago. And last game, he had 4 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. He has been a really good replacement, and he's fit into that offense pretty well. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he retains a little bit of that volume or, a couple targets, 1 or 2 a game when Logan Thomas comes back. Those are the only 2 tight ends I want to talk about, though. Again, just not a whole lot out there, and I don't want to waste our time talking about not worth it players. So let's get to the defenses because I want to point something out to you that I find appalling. The Arizona Cardinals defense is second in fantasy points. They're 43% available. The New Orleans Saints have already had their bye week, and they are third in fantasy points and 62% available. The Chicago Bears are fifth in fantasy points and yet are 68% available. Even Carolina at 47% available is at least 10th in fantasy points, and the Vikings at 70% available are 11th in fantasy points, and they're getting hot. They have 8 sacks and 5 turnovers in their last 2 games. So when you look at those stats, it seems like even in competitive leagues, people are ignoring their defensive positions. There's so much talent out there. I just named for you 5 more than viable options who are around 50 or more than 50% available for you. Are you even paying attention to that position? I wonder. It's crazy to me. We see 3 teams in the top 5 who are 43, 62, and 68% available. There's just no way around it. Go make a move for one of those teams. I'm not even going to break it down any further. You've got options. You've got 5 of them. The Cardinals, the Saints, the Bears, the Panthers, the Vikings. You've got options. Go take a look at the one you like most and go pick them up. Quit holding on to a defense that has a big name. If it hasn't produced, and it's time to move on. I get that we're not going to worry so much about our kicker or our defense than we will our running backs, but don't ignore them and don't be stupid. Those little things that you do, they make a big difference. All right, guys, so that was the video. Again, just kept it nice and simple for you. Pretty straightforward. Wanted this one to be a bit quicker. I don't actually know how long this recording has been so far, so let me know if you appreciated this style waiver video or if you want us to go back to a little bit longer ones like when Rob is normally here. But as always, if you want to support the channel, and I hope you do, like, share, subscribe, and comment. And of course, you guys have a great day, and God bless.